The Tupiniquim population was erased by colonial bureaucracy and ignored by Brazilian historiography and archaeology until now. Being a new approach, there is a vast range of topics to research. We choose to investigate women and their communities of practice regarding ceramic production and food security as an entry to several other themes derived from materiality and social relations. It's important to consider that in the Tupiniquim system, collaborative relations between genders predominated, a fact that is still little known in the universities. These people lived for more than 1500 years in lands that are the majority of the state of São Paulo today. Starting in 1502, part of these communities began to incorporate Europeans, especially Portuguese, who began to live according to Tupi's sociability. The Tupiniquim were never dominated by the Portuguese, who established their presence allowed by a political alliance with part of the Tupiniquim people, leveraging mutual strategic interests. On one hand, the Tupiniquim accepted allies for trade and their wars with other indigenous people. On the other hand, the Portuguese realized a way to establish themselves, using the war to capture enslaved people as an opportunity to join the Atlantic trade system. The participation of women was central, as they lived in collaboration between genders and were an important factor in the policies of relations with others, including the Europeans, who were a demographic minority for over 200 years. The Portuguese only averaged 1,000 people annually after 1550 and 3,000 in 1700. The social context began to be modified in parts of the communities in the 18th century, impacted by the migration of more than 600,000 Portuguese to Brazil. It's necessary to understand that these communities experienced distinct historical processes which allowed them to persist until today. There is a situation in which part of these people keep their traditional knowledge but do not consider themselves indigenous people, while other communities, such as the Tupi-Guarani of Piaçaguera, São Paulo, claim their mixed identity between Tupi and the Guarani and manifest interest in recovering some of their traditional knowledge they no longer produce anymore. It's an example that demands the re-evaluation of the academic erasure of native people in historiography, archaeology, and anthropology of São Paulo, as these people are present regardless of the narratives that outsiders have produced about them. We decided to prioritize women when we realized their fundamental participation in the constellations of communities. About this, there are many written and material sources to be investigated. These women were prominent in many actions throughout Brazil and the other territories in South America. This presentation articulates three research with different purposes that perceive the common aspects of the ceramic practice of Tupiniquim women in the 16th century. It's a case study on the displacement of free people from this community, including the itinerance of their practice. The Tupiniquim women who went from São Vicente to Rio de Janeiro took their materialities with them and reproduced them in their new settlements. They went to places with environmental and ecological features of the same biome of Atlantic rainforest they come from, places that were managed by the Tamoio Tupinambá people. These women actively participated in significant events, as I will show later. The first displacement was between 1565 and 1567 to establish a settlement on Caradicão Hill at the entrance of Rio de Janeiro. The settlement accommodated people who wanted to expel the French and finally beat the Tamoio Tupinambá native people. The area continued to be occupied by people from São Vicente until the beginning of the 17th century, when the place was transformed into a military complex. The second displacement began in 1594 to found and run the Camorim sugar mill plantation as part of a sequence of mill foundations up to the end of the 15th century. As the Tamoio Tupinambá resistance was defeated, the place remains occupied to the present day. This woman left precise archaeological records of their presence in both places, which are also confirmed in historical sources. They made ceramic vessels using local materials, so we define these vessels as Paulista ware, the common Portuguese pottery appropriated and transformed in the 16th century by the Tupiniquim of the São Vicente area for use in colonial settlements, reproduced to the present day in the south of São Paulo. So here we can see these three types of ceramic: Caradicão, Camorim, and ceramics from São Paulo and Paraná from different archaeological sites and museums. We can see also some reconstructions of these ceramics. Here we can see some vessels from Tupiniquim and Tupinambá from different parts of São Paulo from the pre-colonial period. And here we can see from this colonial ceramics that we call it Paulista ware. So the combination of this archaeological and historical source from these two places permitted access to this woman's genealogies. This information allows a unique discovery on the historical archaeology done in Brazil regarding people recognized by their names and families to specific communities of practice in São Vicente area, chronologically situated in the 16th century. Such genealogies refine the understanding of kinship and affinity relations in the Tupiniquim people, serving not only for the past but also for the present from descendants. The fact is that genealogies allow us to understand both the relationships between people and their practice and the distribution of sets of ceramic vessels from different places. We move in the directions of explaining how these constellations of communities of practice are established and how women transmit their knowledge between generations, since genealogical and historical sources allow us to map the agents of people in different places. In addition, reviewing historical sources with a decolonized gaze allows us to propose new problems and increase the chance of finding new meanings for themes that were once limited by the colonialist and sexist perspective, that, for example, did not consider the presence of women in events such as those examined here. Now we will show the genealogies of Tupiniquim women who moved to Rio de Janeiro. There are two different places, one with several families who were engaged in the displacement of French people and in the war against the Tamoio Tupinambá, resulting in the establishment of the settlement of Rio de Janeiro. The other is about a family with relatives and allies who moved to build and operate a plantation. We will present a small sample on both demographic sets that would be much larger, and the families will show maintained kinship relations with several allied families families to form networks of communities of practice. Starting in 1565 on Caradicão Hill, we find Joana Ramalho history, daughter of Bici and João Ramalho, married to Jorge Ferreira. 90 years earlier, in 1556, a Jesuit reported to his superiors that the life of João Ramalho and his sons and daughters was according to that of the Indians. Besides being very well known and related in all the sertão, including living in polygynous households. Such networks of relationships were reiterated in Ferreira's statement. I came to Rio de Janeiro with many people and supplies, and weapons with my children, grandchildren, and brothers-in-law, and relatives and friends. The Camorim sugar mill plantation began after the year 1594. This plantation was part of the largest state of Rio de Janeiro, with over 57 square miles of forest surrounded by a mountain range with access to a lagoon system and the Atlantic Ocean. Esperança da Costa came from São Vicente with family members and allies to build and make the plantation produce. It was a large contingent of free people who developed the place, worked in food security, and watched over and made the enslaved people work. Esperança married Gonçalo Correia de Sá, whose family had been allied with the Tupiniquim for 30 years since the Caradicão events. The couple had only one daughter, who left no descendants but created a network of alliances capable of transforming the Atlantic forest into sugarcane plantation and cattle-raising areas, as well as many agroforest and the bioextractivism management sites to produce their food. So there is a vast collection of archaeological and historical records to understand the role of this woman and their genealogy. But we will also face a considerable number of people and communities that have no written source about them. The fact that we have found a place in the ceramic practice of this Tupiniquim woman in the first half of the 16th century offers us an alternative to the dominant colonialist model. We can now explain the itinerance of a specific practice as a result of displacement of people who left São Paulo for different places in Brazil. We can also understand the persistence of these communities for more than 5 centuries. So, thank you very much. This is my email if someone wants to write me. Thank you.